There are certain names in Hollywood that carry with them more than just the weight of stardom. They carry warmth, resilience, and the ability to make audiences feel as though they truly know the person behind the screen. Sandra Bullock is one of those names. For over 3 decades, she has been a constant presence in cinema, winning hearts not only with her acting but also with her sincerity, humility, and strength in the face of life's most difficult challenges. Now, at 61, Sandra Bullock finds herself at a crossroads in life, one that blends triumph with tragedy, joy with heartbreak. Fans who have followed her journey from her breakthrough in the 1990s to her Oscar-winning roles and beyond are left both inspired and emotional by what she has endured. The story of Sandra Bullock at this stage in her life is not simply a tale of Hollywood glamour. It is the story of a woman who has faced betrayal, loss, and unimaginable pain. Yet somehow, she has continued to shine. To understand what happened to Sandra Bullock at 61, we must travel back through the chapters of her life. Her beginnings as the daughter of a German opera singer and an American military man, her early struggles in New York City, the overnight stardom brought by speed, and the personal trials that tested her in ways fame could never shield her from. As we revisit the path that led Sandra Bullock to where she is today, prepare yourself. There are moments in her story that will break your heart, and others that will remind you why she has always been known as America's sweetheart. Sandra Annette Bullock was born on July 26, 1964, in Arlington, Virginia. Her childhood was a blend of cultures and influences that would shape her into the unique, grounded individual she would later become. Her father, John W. Bullock, was a United States Army employee and voice coach, while her mother, Helga Meyer, was a celebrated German opera singer. Sandra's early years were spent in Germany, where her mother performed in opera houses across Europe. This environment immersed young Sandra in the world of performance. From the time she was a child, she could often be seen behind the stage curtains, observing rehearsals, costumes, and the discipline required of performers. While other children were playing in backyards, Sandra was absorbing the energy of the stage, unknowingly preparing herself for the career that awaited her. Despite this artistic upbringing, Sandra's childhood was not glamorous. She was teased in school for her accent and struggled to fit in after moving back to the United States. Yet, those experiences would only make her stronger, instilling in her a resilience that would later help her survive Hollywood's harshest lights. Her mother encouraged her to pursue performance, enrolling her in ballet and vocal lessons. Though she had the support of her parents, Sandra was also taught humility. The Bullock household valued discipline, education, and responsibility. It was this balance of artistry and grounded living that made Sandra relatable to millions later in life, a superstar who somehow never lost her sense of normalcy. After graduating from high school, Sandra attended East Carolina University in North Carolina, where she studied drama. While there, she participated in theater productions and began shaping her craft. But like many dreamers, Sandra soon realized that if she wanted to make it as an actress, she would need to be where the industry lived and breathed, New York City. Moving to New York was a leap of faith, and one that came with countless challenges. Sandra arrived with big dreams but very little money. She worked as a bartender, waitress, and coat checker to make ends meet while auditioning during the day. The rejections piled up, often leaving her wondering if she had chosen the wrong path. But Sandra was never one to give up easily. She took acting classes with Sanford Meisner, one of the most respected teachers of the craft, and performed in small theater productions. Slowly, she began landing minor roles in television and low-budget films. They weren't glamorous jobs, but they were stepping stones. Her persistence began to pay off in the late 1980s and early 1990s when she was cast in small parts in films like Working Girl, 1988, and Love Potion No. 9, 1992. These roles introduced her to wider audiences, but she was still far from being a household name. In those years of struggle, Sandra often questioned whether the sacrifices were worth it. But her determination, and perhaps destiny, kept her moving forward. Little did she know that one role was about to change everything and propel her from obscurity to superstardom. The turning point in Sandra Bullock's career came in 1993 when she landed a role opposite Sylvester Stallone and Wesley Snipes in the futuristic action film Demolition Man. While the movie itself received mixed reviews, critics and audiences alike took note of Bullock's charisma. She had an effortless charm that made her stand out, even in a film filled with action sequences and larger-than-life stars. But it was the 1994 action thriller Speed that changed her life forever. Starring opposite Keanu Reeves, Sandra played Annie Porter, a passenger forced to drive a city bus rigged with explosives. The film was a massive box office success, grossing over $350 million worldwide. More importantly, it introduced Sandra Bullock as Hollywood's newest leading lady. Audiences instantly fell in love with her combination of vulnerability, humor, and strength. She wasn't the stereotypical Hollywood starlet. She was relatable, approachable, and authentic. Critics praised her performance, and suddenly, Sandra Bullock was no longer struggling to land roles, she was being offered them. With speed, Sandra went from being a little-known actress to a star whose face was recognized across the world. But with fame came new pressures, expectations, and challenges that would test her resilience in ways she had never experienced before. For many actors, winning an Academy Award represents the pinnacle of achievement, a symbol that their work has not only entertained but truly mattered. For Sandra Bullock, that moment came in 2009 with her role in The Blind Side. Portraying Lee and Tui, a strong-willed Southern woman who adopts and mentors future NFL player Michael O'Hare, Sandra delivered one of the most moving performances of her career. The film, based on a true story, was a box office smash, earning over $300 million worldwide. But more importantly, it allowed Sandra to step away from her comedic persona and prove her dramatic depth. At the 82nd Academy Awards in 2010, Sandra Bullock won the Oscar for Best Actress. Dressed in a shimmering gown, she stood on stage with tears in her eyes, thanking her family, friends, and fellow actors. Her speech was heartfelt and humble, reflecting the qualities that had made her beloved in the first place. That same year, she also received a Golden Globe and a Screen Actors Guild Award. It was the culmination of decades of hard work and resilience, a validation that she had truly arrived as one of the greatest actresses of her generation. But life has a cruel way of balancing triumph with tragedy. Just as Sandra reached the highest professional peak of her career, her personal life began to crumble in a very public and heartbreaking way. In 2005, Sandra Bullock married motorcycle builder and reality TV personality Jesse James. At first, their marriage seemed unconventional but happy. Sandra had found love outside of Hollywood, with someone she believed grounded her. She spoke often about the joy of family life, appearing more content than ever. But in 2010, just days after her Oscar win, everything changed. Reports surfaced that Jesse James had been unfaithful, involved in multiple affairs during their marriage. The revelation shocked the world, not only because of the scandal itself but because of the timing. Sandra had just experienced her greatest career triumph, and now she was facing her greatest personal humiliation. The media frenzy was relentless. Tabloid headlines speculated about the betrayal, dissecting every detail of her private pain. For someone who valued privacy as much as Sandra, the exposure was devastating. She withdrew from public life, canceling red carpet appearances and interviews. Friends later revealed that Sandra was heartbroken but determined to protect her dignity. She filed for divorce and moved forward with quiet strength. The contrast was striking. On one hand, she was an Oscar-winning actress adored by millions. On the other, a woman privately reeling from betrayal and loss. This chapter of Sandra's life could have defined her by pain and scandal. Instead, she chose to redefine herself on her own terms. Out of heartbreak came a new purpose, one that would forever change her life. By the 2010s, many actresses of Sandra Bullock's generation found themselves facing a painful truth. Hollywood often discarded women once they passed a certain age. But Sandra was different. Not only did she continue to lead films into her late 40s and 50s, she redefined what a female star in Hollywood could be. Her most significant achievement during this period came with Gravity, 2013. Directed by Alfonso Cuarón, the sci-fi thriller was unlike anything Sandra had ever done. The story followed Dr. Ryan Stone, a medical engineer stranded in space after a catastrophic accident. For much of the film, Sandra carried the screen alone, an acting challenge of immense proportions. The physical demands were grueling. Filming required months of harness work, intricate choreography, and long hours suspended in rigs to mimic zero gravity. But beyond the technical feats, Sandra delivered a performance filled with raw emotion, fear, despair, and ultimately hope. Her portrayal was both vulnerable and resilient, reminding audiences why she was one of the most versatile talents of her generation. Gravity became a global phenomenon, grossing over $700 million and winning 7 Academy Awards. Sandra herself was nominated for Best Actress once again, solidifying her status as one of Hollywood's most respected performers. She proved that women could lead massive blockbusters and that age was no barrier to excellence. Following Gravity, Sandra continued her run with films like The Heat, 2013, where she showcased her comedic timing opposite Melissa McCarthy, and Ocean's 8, 2018, where she led a star-studded female ensemble. She had reached a rare place in Hollywood, respected by critics, adored by fans, and trusted by studios. Yet, even as her career soared, Sandra increasingly began to turn her attention inward. She had achieved all the professional milestones one could dream of. What mattered most now was the life she was quietly building behind the cameras. For much of her career, Sandra Bullock kept her personal life out of the spotlight. After the very public heartbreak of her divorce, she became even more protective of her private world. So when she began dating Bryan Randall, a professional photographer, she chose to keep the relationship quiet and away from Hollywood's gaze. The two reportedly met in 2015 when Sandra hired Bryan to photograph her son Louis's birthday party. Their connection was immediate, rooted not in glitz or fame but in shared values. Bryan, a former model turned photographer, had a grounded presence that Sandra found comforting. As their relationship deepened, Bryan became a father figure to Louis and Layla. The couple created a blended family built on love, routine, and stability. Everything Sandra had longed for after the turbulence of her earlier years. Friends described Bryan as deeply supportive, someone who gave Sandra the safe space she needed to focus on motherhood. Unlike her past relationships, Sandra never felt the need to showcase this love to the world. They rarely appeared together at public events, and Bryan was almost never seen on red carpets. Their happiness existed in private moments, vacations with the kids, quiet evenings at home, and the kind of everyday life that Sandra valued more than any Hollywood spotlight. To outsiders, it seemed Sandra had finally found peace. She had her children, a partner who cherished her, and a career that she could step in and out of at will. But fate had a cruel twist in store, one that would challenge Sandra in ways she had never imagined. In 2017, Bryan Randall received a devastating diagnosis, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, more commonly known as ALS or Lou Gehrig's disease. The progressive neurodegenerative illness slowly robs the body of its ability to move, speak, and eventually breathe, even as the mind remains fully aware. The news was heartbreaking. Sandra and Bryan made the difficult decision to keep his illness private. They did not issue public statements, give interviews, or seek sympathy from the press. Instead, they chose to battle the disease quietly, within the walls of their home, surrounded by love. Sandra made a life-altering choice. At the height of her career, with more offers than ever, she stepped away from acting to devote herself to Bryan's care and her children. In 2022, she told CBS Sunday Morning that she would be taking a break from Hollywood to focus on being 24/7 with my babies. Few knew the full weight behind those words. She was also caring for the love of her life as his health deteriorated. Friends who visited during those years described Sandra as unwaveringly devoted. She managed household routines, cared for Bryan with compassion, and shielded her children from as much pain as she could. It was a private battle, but one that revealed Sandra's true strength. On August 5, 2023, after a 3-year struggle with ALS, Bryan Randall passed away at the age of 57. His family released a statement confirming his death, thanking the doctors and caregivers who had supported him. Sandra herself did not issue a personal statement. She remained silent, grieving in private. The loss was devastating. To the world, Sandra was a celebrated actress. To her children, she was a loving mother. But to Bryan, she had been a partner, caregiver, and source of unconditional love during his hardest journey. His passing left a void that no award or achievement could ever fill. Life after Bryan's death has been one of the most difficult chapters Sandra Bullock has ever faced. At 59, she found herself navigating the unbearable grief of losing a partner while continuing to raise 2 young children who also lost a father figure. In the months following his passing, Sandra retreated almost entirely from public life. She declined film offers, avoided red carpets, and focused solely on Louis and Layla. For her, healing could not come from the outside world. It had to be found in the quiet moments at home, in the routines of parenting, and in the love she shared with her children. Friends and colleagues rallied around her. Fellow actresses like Jennifer Aniston and her Ocean's 8 castmates offered their support. Hollywood insiders spoke of her remarkable strength, noting that while she was shattered by grief, she was also determined to give her children a sense of stability. Fans across the world mourned with her. Social media filled with tributes to Bryan and messages of love for Sandra. People who had followed her career for decades felt her pain as if it were their own, a testament to the deep bond she had built with audiences. Now, as she moves forward at 61, Sandra is still processing her loss. She has spoken little publicly, but those close to her say she is focusing on family, finding joy in the milestones of her children, and slowly healing. Whether she will return to acting or remain away from Hollywood remains unknown. What is clear, however, is that Sandra Bullock's story is no longer just about fame or success. It is about resilience. It is about love that endures even in loss. And it is about the strength of a woman who has faced some of life's hardest blows yet continues to stand tall, for herself, and for the family she holds dear. When Sandra Bullock turned 60 in July 2024, the milestone carried a significance far beyond candles on a cake. In an industry where women have often been dismissed once they reach middle age, Sandra's presence remained undeniable. She had defied the odds, building a career that spanned decades, genres, and generations of fans. But for Sandra, 60 was not a number to fear. She had long since made peace with aging, openly speaking in interviews about the importance of authenticity over chasing youth. Unlike many in Hollywood, she never chased excessive cosmetic procedures or tried to reinvent herself to meet impossible standards. Instead, she embraced her natural beauty, showing the world that grace, wit, and confidence are far more powerful than superficial measures of age. Privately, turning 60 was bittersweet. Sandra was still grieving the loss of Bryan Randall, who had passed away less than a year before. While birthdays had once been moments of celebration, this one was marked by quiet reflection. She spent the day surrounded by Louis and Layla, choosing family over fanfare. For her, their laughter and love meant more than any Hollywood spotlight ever could. As friends and colleagues paid tribute to her milestone, what stood out most was the admiration for how she had balanced fame and family. She was no longer defined by her next role or box office hit. She was defined by the life she had built for herself and her children. At 60, Sandra found herself in a chapter of life where peace and purpose mattered more than prestige. Now at 61, Sandra Bullock's life looks very different from the Hollywood whirlwind of her earlier years. The glamorous premieres, back-to-back productions, and constant headlines have given way to something quieter, more grounded, and deeply human. In the wake of Bryan Randall's passing, Sandra's focus has been entirely on her children. Louis, now a teenager, and Layla, growing into her own identity, remain her top priority. Sandra has spoken about wanting to give them a sense of normalcy, a life not overshadowed by the chaos of fame. She drives them to school, attends their activities, and cherishes the simple routines of motherhood. Rumors continue to swirl about her possible return to acting. Fans eagerly wonder if she will step back onto the screen, especially as projects are often written with her in mind. But Sandra has made it clear that her priorities have shifted. She may take on a role someday if it feels right, but she no longer defines herself by her career. Emotionally, 61 has been a year of both healing and rediscovery. Grief lingers, it always will, but Sandra has found strength in honoring Bryan's memory through the love she pours into her family. She is not the woman chasing scripts or awards anymore. She is the woman sitting on the sidelines of a soccer game, cheering for her daughter. She is the mother helping her son navigate adolescence. She is a survivor who has redefined success on her own terms. This is what happened at 61. Sandra Bullock has chosen a life of peace over pressure, family over fame, and love over legacy. With Sandra stepping away from the public eye, fans have grown concerned about her health. In the months following Bryan's death, tabloids speculated about her well-being, suggesting that the emotional toll might have affected her physically. Rumors of illness spread quickly, fueled by her absence from Hollywood. But those close to Sandra dismissed these claims. While grief has undoubtedly been heavy, Sandra remains strong and committed to her children. She has not battled any publicly known illnesses beyond the natural wear and tear of life in her 60s. What people mistake for frailty is, in reality, her choice to live privately, away from constant cameras. Sandra has always valued health and wellness. She practices meditation, maintains a balanced diet, and finds comfort in simple routines. Her priority now is mental health, finding peace after years of personal challenges. She is not the kind of person to chase Hollywood glamour at the expense of her own well-being. Instead, she has focused on healing, strength, and emotional resilience. For fans, the most important truth is this: Sandra Bullock is not disappearing. She is simply choosing a life where her health, happiness, and family come first. Few actors leave behind a legacy as rich and enduring as Sandra Bullock's. Her career is not defined by a single genre or role, it is defined by her remarkable versatility. She could make audiences laugh in Congeniality, cry in The Blind Side, and hold their breath in Gravity. She was, and remains, one of the rare performers who could carry a film across any genre. Her peers respect her not only as an actress but also as a producer and advocate. Through her company, Fortis Films, Sandra brought projects to life that might otherwise have been overlooked. She championed stories with heart, humor, and depth, and she gave opportunities to emerging talent. Younger actresses often cite Sandra as a role model, not only for her career choices but also for how she navigated fame. She proved that it was possible to be successful without surrendering authenticity. She showed that resilience could turn heartbreak into strength, and that motherhood could be the most powerful role of all. In Hollywood history, Sandra Bullock stands tall, not just as an Oscar-winning actress but as a symbol of perseverance, grace, and integrity. Sandra Bullock has always held a rare position in Hollywood, beloved not just by critics and directors but by the everyday people who watch her films. There are countless stories from fans who met her on film sets, at charity events, or simply by chance in daily life. What makes these stories remarkable is their consistency. Sandra is always described as warm, approachable, and genuinely kind. Unlike many celebrities who carry an air of distance, Sandra has always treated people like equals. A woman once recalled meeting her in New Orleans, where Sandra owns a home and often contributes to the community. Instead of brushing off the interaction, Sandra took the time to ask about her family, even cracking a joke to lighten the mood. Another fan remembered seeing her at a grocery store, dressed casually in jeans and a baseball cap, helping an elderly woman reach a box from a high shelf. These aren't publicity stunts, they're everyday glimpses into who she is at her core. On social media, her fan base remains active and loyal. When Bryan Randall passed away in 2023, thousands of people sent messages of support under her photos, writing about how much strength she had shown. Fans created tribute threads, calling her a beacon of resilience and Hollywood's most genuine soul. Some shared how her performances helped them through grief or heartbreak. One young mother wrote that she leaned on the blind side during her own adoption journey, saying Sandra's portrayal gave her courage. Sandra's relatability comes from her honesty. She has never pretended her life is perfect. She's spoken candidly about betrayal, about heartbreak, and most recently about loss. For millions of people, this honesty bridges the gap between star and spectator. Sandra isn't just a glamorous actress, she's a human being navigating the same joys and sorrows as everyone else. Looking back at Sandra Bullock's life, it's impossible not to see it as a story of soaring triumphs and crushing lows. Professionally, she climbed to the very top, starring in blockbuster hits, winning an Oscar, and cementing herself as one of the most bankable stars of her generation. Her comedic timing in Miss Congeniality, her vulnerability in The Blind Side, her grit in Gravity, each performance revealed a different shade of her talent. Yet, off the screen, she has carried deep burdens. The betrayal of her first marriage could have broken her spirit. The painful decision to raise her children in the spotlight, while protecting them from it, took immense courage. Then came Bryan Randall's ALS diagnosis and passing, which shook the foundation of her private world. These moments represent the cry in her story, the tears that fans can't help but shed when they learn of all she has endured. But what makes Sandra's journey extraordinary is the resilience threaded through every hardship. Instead of retreating into bitterness, she chose love. She chose her children. She chose to devote years of her life to caring for Bryan in his final days. She didn't do this for applause, nor for sympathy. She did it because that is who she is, a woman who stands tall when life tries to push her down. This emotional weight, the mixture of joy and pain, has made Sandra more than an actress. She has become a symbol of strength for millions of people who see their own struggles reflected in hers. She reminds the world that life can break your heart and still be worth living, that success doesn't erase sorrow, and that love is always worth the risk. Sandra Bullock's story is one of beauty, brilliance, and heartbreaking humanity. At 61, she stands as both a Hollywood legend and a survivor of life's cruelties. She has given us unforgettable performances, roles that made us laugh, cry, and reflect on the human condition. But perhaps her greatest role has been off-screen, being a mother, a partner, and a woman of unwavering resilience. The bittersweet truth is that behind the glamour, Sandra has endured more pain than many realize. The loss of Bryan Randall remains a shadow in her life, a reminder that love and grief are inseparable. Yet, even in that grief, she finds strength, for her children, for herself, and for those who look up to her. Try not to cry when you see this. A woman who once made the world laugh in Miss Congeniality, who made us believe in second chances in The Blind Side, who carried humanity's hope in Gravity, now carries her own story with grace. She has shown us that resilience doesn't mean avoiding pain, it means walking through it and still choosing love. Sandra Bullock's legacy will live far beyond her films. It lives in the hearts of fans who see her as more than a star. It lives in her children, who will carry forward her strength and kindness. And it lives in the reminder that even when life breaks us, we can still shine. If Sandra Bullock's journey moved you, if her strength and vulnerability touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that reveal the untold truths behind the stars we love. Sandra's story reminds us that behind every performance is a human being navigating the same challenges we face, and her resilience is something we can all learn from.